So, what?
We don't have them, do we?
Oh, they went out with, apparently not. They went out with the agendas on Friday that I think Diane was going to send. So you know what? We were going to switch anyway, so let's have Jill start with compensation because the consultants are on the line, and then we'll go make quick copies for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, she left us on this.
Okay, well, Mayor and Commissioners, thank you again for your time this morning. We do appreciate it. So let's talk about compensation first. And so as we discussed in the 2024 budget process, we knew that compensation was going to be a very active topic of discussion as we planned for 2025, 2026, and beyond. And so as we talked about last year, we really view compensation as being a cornerstone element to our compensation and benefits package for the City of Fargo's employees. It really allows us to think about all of our business operations. Every single day, we have people in vehicles, at service counters, serving the public, and in our general fund, about 75% of that general fund is actually people. So when we talk about compensation, it's a really important topic, and it's one that we want to be quite thoughtful about as we plan for 2025 and 2026. And so today, what we want to do is really focus some time and energy about some of the key elements and takeaways that our consultant team, MRA, has worked on, and our HR team. So our HR team, our finance team, together with MRA, has got some preliminary information pulled together for you. But what we want to talk about is your philosophy today. So think about that as we move throughout this presentation. The compensation philosophy that the City Commission desires to see for its employees and for its organization. That really will be the cornerstone as we wrap up the conversation today. It's quite critical that we align your expectations to where it is we need to be on these compensation models. And so I'll leave it at that and then turn it over to Jill. She's going to talk about some of our outline and our topics today. But we do appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, good morning, and as Michael said, we appreciate the time today. Compensation is a complex topic. There's a lot of detail that goes into this whole process of determining market and looking at what our overall salary structure could look like in our proposals that we're going to go through today. We are going to try to, we have some handouts that we'll give to you in just a little bit here at that when we reach that point in the presentation. We're going to try to give as a high level explanation as we can, but certainly if you have questions as we go through, please let us know. I'm going to go back a slide here. So as Michael said, we really are hoping to, through this process, adopt a compensation philosophy. And you might recall from back in February when we first talked about this, that's really just a formal statement that decides that related to our employee comp and helps to make those decisions relating to comp. And of course, the human capital budget or personnel budget have to align with that comp philosophy. So as we discussed during our February finance meeting, we engaged our comp consultants, MRA, back in 2020. But of course, the project was put on hold due to the pandemic. We re-engaged them early last year and worked on this salary structure project. However, we realized early in the 2024 budget process that we would not be able to advance a new structure this year. So our hope is that we will be able to advance a structure, an updated salary structure in 2025. Again, we're going to cover a lot of detail today, but our focus really is looking at guidance, or looking for guidance, I should say, on our overall philosophy. So you've seen this chart, and Michael already alluded to this, that over 75% of the general fund is for salary and benefits. So whenever we make an adjustment to our pay structure, it's a pretty large amount of money that increases the budget. So just wanted to point out at the start here that an approximate annual cost of a 1% increase to our structure for salary only is about 879,000. If we look at salary and the effect on benefits, we're looking at 1.028 million. And again, that's just looking at a 1% increase to the overall budget. So our strategy for 2024, and when we started this project with MRA even earlier than this, we knew we really needed to analyze our range spreads. We were seeing through the market that our range spreads were much lower than other cities throughout the region that we compare with. So we'll touch on the specifics on that in just a minute. We also wanted to consider the length of time that it takes to reach the maximum of the pay grade. We wanted to look at whether our current step increases are adequate and competitive with the market. And so in 2024, we were scheduled to complete a public safety regional survey and then also to look at market data for the health department. And that work has been completed by MRA, our consultants, who we're going to introduce in just a minute here. But just by way of reminder, our current salary structure looks like this. So this is an example of a grade 12 position. We have 11 steps, and currently our range spread is a 30% range spread. This is an example of public safety ranges, and you might recall back in 2019, we really did something different with our police and fire ranges or grades, because at that time already we were seeing that our range spreads were much narrower than the market. And when we compared the growth through the range, we realized our steps were also under market. So we implemented a pay plan at that time that is aligned with our current grades, with our other pay grades, but it allows for accelerated growth through the entire range. So in other words, where our general positions are going from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, with our public safety, we have them skipping some of the steps. So what you see accounts for, in many cases, a 5+% increase, where the other city employees with those step increases are receiving a 2 to 3% increase. And you can see the wider range spread as well. We've got, with most of our public safety ranges, about a 48 to 50% spread. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to introduce our consultants from MRA, and we will ask them to do a brief introduction of themselves as well. So, Pat, we'll begin with you.
Pat, we can't hear you right now. It looks like your picture is frozen. Christy, are you live?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, but Pat looks like she's frozen. She may have to reboot.
Okay, I will ping her. Well, I can go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Christy Reitz. I am a compensation director with MRA. I started with MRA back in October of 2023. So I'm fairly new, but I'm not new to compensation consulting. I have approximately 15 years experience doing compensation consulting projects similar to this at different firms, and my expertise is public sector. So I come in on the public safety side, and Pat can speak to the structure update. Let me see if I can get a hold of her.
So while we are waiting for Pat to connect, I think we will go ahead and start to hand out the documents that we are going to be looking through throughout the presentation from both Pat and from Christy. So we'll pause there and get those handed out. And hopefully Pat will be able to connect here shortly.
She's going to try to log out and back in.
We did, yeah, I was going to say, we did mention it's complicated, so lots of details. What you're going to be receiving for handouts is our current pay structure. So you'll see that has the yellow highlighting on the top of it. And then you'll see an option A and B for all of our positions. Separate documents for police and fire, options A and B. There we go. Pat, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. All right. So Christy already did her introduction. If you would introduce yourself, and then we can move into your slides with Brian's help.
Okay, sounds good. My name is Pat Wamser. I'm a compensation director at MRA. Been there about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I have been a compensation consultant with the Hay Group, with Mercer, and have had my own business since 1997. So let's see, my slides going here. Use what to share entire screen. Where is my? No, let's see. Screen one. I'm not finding my presentation, so just a second here. Okay. There we go. Okay. Everybody see that? Okay, what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of background on how we got from doing our study last year with you to where we are today. We worked with City of Fargo throughout 2023 to make recommendations for the 2024 pay range update. And there were some objectives we had, some of which were realized and some not. But primarily, we were looking to get your salary structure anchored in the market. And what we ended up recommending was that we have step 9 of your salary structure positioned at the 75th percentile of the market. And I'll talk more about that in a second. We recommended that steps be made uniform with a percentage. So we're recommending 2.5%, as opposed to your steps are now cents per hour. And the problem with that is moving from step 3 to step 4 should be as meaningful as moving from step 10 to 11. And when you're using a cents per hour, the impact of the step lessens as you go up, because it's the same amount of money, but it's applied to higher base. So, and then the last thing was to widen the salary ranges. Your salary ranges are currently 30% wide. The market average in the survey that we did for you guys is more like 46%. So we were looking to recognize that most other organizations have wider salary ranges. Let me get down here. There we go. There are two value systems in your pay plan. This is very common for public sector employers. The first one is job evaluation, internal job evaluation system, set of standards. You compare every job can be evaluated based on some compensable factors, and points are assigned. So every job at Fargo has a total point value, and that total point value is used to put the job into one of your pay grades. The second value system is the external market. And what you're doing there is you're trying to match as many of your jobs as possible to survey data so that you have a sense of the external value of each job. Market pricing doesn't usually allow you to value every job, thus you use job evaluation for that. And what we do is we use market data then to determine what your pay ranges should be. And so the ranges and the overall structure gets priced with market data. Each individual job is graded with job evaluation. When we worked with you last year, we were aiming to find that anchor in your pay structure that can be connected to the market. So we had done a survey for the city of Fargo in 2022 in anticipation of doing a pay study following that. That got delayed a bit, so we ended up beginning the pay study in 2023. So in order to use the market data, we projected the data ahead to January 1st, 2024, using a 6.4% projection. What that just means is that we knew what other organizations were doing in terms of increasing their pay structures, and we wanted to apply that kind of a factor to get our market data to 2024. And for the market data, there are 3 points in the market that are established for every job that we've been able to price. There's a 25th percentile. You may be familiar with this already. I'm going to just quickly say the 25th percentile. If I've got 100 rates in a salary survey, the 25th percentile in that array is the number where 25% of the data is below it, 75% is above. 50th percentile or median, the data is split in half. So half of the data is below, half above. And the 75th percentile is the mirror image of the 25th. 75% of the market is below it, 25% above. So what we're trying to do with the market data is figure out where your 2023 pay ranges were in the market. And so we overlaid this data, the P25, P50, P75, on each of your grades, and found that on average, the 25th percentile of the market fell on your step 1. The 50th percentile fell on step 5, and the 75th percentile fell on step 9. So what we're looking to say is, let's find a place in your salary ranges where we can match the market to one of the steps, and then that will give us a point of reference at next time you do an update. You know where you're positioning your ranges. City of Fargo was one of the larger employers in the cities in the survey that we did for you all. So what we proposed is that we use step 9 as a place to anchor the 75th percentile of the market. So when you reach step 9, generally after 8 years of service or in the job, but you reach step 9, you're at a place in the market where 75% of the market pays below and 25% pays above.
Could I interject a question here, please?
Sure.
Just for my sake, when you're saying that we're the largest, one of the largest cities in your comparisons, who were we comparing to in his comparing to smaller cities what we want to do?
You were comparing to, let me read. There were both regional, and when we say regional, we mean more Midwest kind of area, and then much more close surveys, cities. So the ones we compared to were Bloomington, Cedar Rapids, Cheyenne, Des Moines, Fort Collins, Colorado, Grand Forks, Lawrence, Kansas, Lee's Summit, Missouri, Moorhead, Olathe, Kansas, Rapid City, Rockford, Illinois, Sioux Falls, St. Cloud, and West Fargo. Now, we also did the same. We did an analysis of just those participants that are in South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota, and found that the results were very similar. They were within 1% of each other, which tells us that you picked cities that are similar to you, probably in size. Jill will have to speak to this because I wasn't around when the survey was done. Generally what you want to do is you want to pick cities that you're first and foremost, who do you lose people to? Who do you get people that kind of comparison, which would make it more local. But also for some of your jobs, your management jobs and that sort of thing, you might very well recruit within the Midwest for those kinds of jobs. So knowing what other similar sized cities pay is helpful. But this is exactly a point in your compensation philosophy, excuse me. Who is your market? How do you define the market?
Just to add to that, Pat, you're absolutely right. When we do our regional survey, we are looking at that larger Midwest region. But then we do tend to also look at kind of the smaller regional bubble, right? We look at where are we primarily recruiting and receiving applicants from. And of course, that varies from one position to the next. But that's why we study the larger region. We look at population, size, and scope, and collect all that data in the survey itself as well, so that we can make those comparisons. Okay, Pat.
Okay. The work we've been doing with human resources since the beginning of the year is to look at what would have to happen to the structure to achieve the objectives we set out, and that would be to position P75 at step 9, to use 2.5% steps, and to widen your ranges. So we have two options. One, option A, basically is taking your current structure and making some structural changes. One is right now, step 9 is 2.5% below P75. And the reason for that is when we made our proposals to you last year, the end of the year, we proposed a 4.5% increase to step 9 to position you at the 75th percentile. And that wasn't possible to fund, so you increased your structure by 2%. So essentially, you're sitting 2.5% below P75 right now. We did recalculate the steps. We also added 6 steps above step 11. So this results in 48% range widths. This one is just to say, if we took what we are doing now and embellished it to achieve these objectives, this is what you would have. So there's cost obviously associated with bringing people to the steps, that sort of thing. Option B, I'm sorry.
Could I ask a question here? And I don't know if this is the appropriate timing or not, but the selection of step 9 being the P75, it sounds to me like it's a philosophical kind of decision to perhaps focus on retention versus recruitment, with step 1 being the P25. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're understanding correctly. It's a philosophical decision. But in most organizations, the very beginning of their salary structure is not set at the target market position, because it generally represents the place where you pay people who are new in the job and haven't had any much experience or haven't, done the job for very long. So what we were looking to do is we could have said, let's put step 5 at the 50th percentile of the market, but you're already, that would say that you'd bring them to the 50th percentile after 4 years, either on the job or in the organization, depending on how you determine to do that. So yeah, it's kind of like what you do is you usually try to look at how is the organization paying right now. So current market data with current, at the end of last year, the 2023 pay schedule. And what we basically saw was that you 2 steps below the top of your structure, you were already paying around the P75. So yeah, it's philosophical to say, let's use that as our anchor. You could have used something else, but either way, the bottom of the structure is at the 25th percentile, and that would be not uncommon for how other organizations develop a structure. P75 is an aggressive market position, but let me put it in the context that we're using a single survey source of cities of somewhat like size in a region. So with that in mind, you are one of the larger cities in what we surveyed. And so the idea is, if that's our market, where should we anchor ourselves? And I recommend P75 only because you are one of the larger. So where do I put myself in a sample that has smaller cities? So I hope that answered your question.
It
But
did, thank you.
your compensation philosophy would include something that states this is where we want to anchor ourselves in the market. Option B is basically option A, except we have increased step 9, 2.5% to bring it to P75 as of 1/1/24. So the idea is to give you, basically to implement what we felt was necessary in the first place to achieve that P75 position at step 9, and then adding the steps to create more width and the uniform step increases.
Okay, so Pat,
I'm thinking,
are you
go ahead, Jill.
finished with your last slide? Or did you?
I'm finished with my last slide.
Okay, so I think what we'll do next then is we'll move to Christy. Christy focused on the public safety positions. Mayor, did you have a question?
Just had one question, Pat. So if we decided step 9 was 75%, if we decided to go to 60%, that wouldn't be step 9. That'd maybe be step 8 or something like that. If the commission said we want to be 60% tile at step whatever, Or is it
Okay.
75% our whole, when you say 75%, that's our whole pay structure?
It says that every step 9 is positioned at 75%, 75th percentile of the market. If you wanted to be, for example, a 60th percentile payer instead of a 75th, what you would do is say, let's figure out, you might say step 8, but you could put step 9 at the 60th percentile too, if you wanted to take a less aggressive position. What we're really doing here is we're capturing what you're already doing in terms of market position by putting P75 at step 9. If we put P50 or P60 at step 9, then the salary ranges would be lower than they are with P75 at step 9.
But we would be then behind market, is what you would say. We're behind market right now, so the P75 at the step 9 brings us back to market, basically, right?
Yes. And when I say behind, yes, that's in essence, that's right.
Okay, thank you, Pat. And we'll move to Christy now for an overview of the public safety market and that portion of the project. And then after Christy's presentation, we'll kind of get into more detail about what those option A, option B, what they look like.
Sure. Thanks, Jill. So like Jill said, I did do, I focused on the public safety survey that we completed earlier this year. And what we did was we looked at 13 sworn job titles using current job descriptions. We surveyed peer employers. So that list of peer employers that Pat used is similar. We've done surveys in the past for the city of Fargo. So we typically have kind of replicated the peer list. And then of those peers, we had 22 respondents. And I have a list of them on the next slide. So the next thing we wanted to do after we had gathered that market data and done some analysis on it was to align those titles into the proposed structures. So that's talking about that option A and option B. And when we did that, what we wanted to do was keep the grades the same as within the citywide structures, but we retained those accelerated steps that are currently in place, as Jill had described earlier. And then we went through doing an employee impact report, and that's just to look at where the current employees are within their pay, and then to determine any adjustments that are needed to get them within the new pay structures.
Christy?
So yep, go ahead.
Or Jill, I don't know who will answer this, but can somebody just explain why public safety was pulled out?
So I can start with that, and Christy, maybe you can add on. So public safety, when we started to study all public safety positions back in 2018 and ultimately implemented in 2019, what we found was our range spreads were much narrower than the region. And we were not, in some cases, we were not keeping up with market on our step increases. So between the steps and the COLAs, we were starting to lag market within the region. But even when we looked more locally, again, think about that local bubble with Moorhead, West Fargo, Grand Forks. So at that time, we implemented again, a plan that was aligned with our current plan, which is our intent here too. So the starting rate will be aligned with current plan. But in order to keep up with market, so just even at matching market, we needed to accelerate the growth through the range. And we'll show you in a few minutes more specifically what that looks like when we look at the proposed. That was necessary in order, again, to be competitive with not only the regional market, but even our local market.
So it was a recruitment issue, perhaps?
It supported recruiting, but retention as well. Because especially when we were getting to steps 3, 4, 5, we were really lagging in the market. So it was necessary for both purposes.
And Jill, and I think as part of the budgeting process last year for this year's budget, we have a 3-year schedule of what's going to be reviewed each year, which departments, right, as part of the salary review?
Yes, that's correct. So, we were finding with our past surveys, like the 22 survey that was used for this, we had over 100 positions, and so we got much less of a response than what we would have liked to have gotten. When this year with the public safety survey, it was just by isolating those positions, we got a much greater response. And so we have that 3-year cycle that we'll be grouping. I think next year's are more technical positions, and then the following are more administrative. And we may need to do some smaller surveys within that 3-year cycle, but that will give us, I think, the greatest opportunity for good, robust data to compare with. Okay, Christy.
Sure. So here you're going to see the respondents or the peer employers that were included in the public safety analysis and review of current ranges. And I have asterisk the smaller group, so the Minnesota peers, the North Dakota peers, and the South Dakota peers, just identifying them as kind of a smaller, more localized group within the region. So here, we're just going to show you a couple comparisons. So this is the firefighter information currently. So this top table here is going to show you what the market position is at entry step, mid step, and top step. So not every peer employer has a step structure in place. So some have open ranges, so that indicates they would have a minimum and a maximum, and then a midpoint is calculated. So these were the most relevant data points for us to look at for purposes of your entire range. So how well do you compete with market? So in this top one here is the current. So you'll see at entry step, you are slightly behind, slightly lagging market. At mid step, you get kind of right on market. And then at top step, you're leading the market slightly. This is for your firefighters. And then with option A and option B, what you're going to see is an increase of your comparison to market because we are increasing the structures with option A. And then in addition, there is additional adjustments in option B. So we get closer to market when we look at option A and option B versus what you currently have in place. The next thing I wanted to show was where you compare, or where does Fargo, where did the rates of pay fit within the groups, right? So we're kind of looking at where you're ranked. This is the full group. So we're also, again, looking at entry step, mid step, and top step. So what you're going to see is at entry step, because you are lagging market slightly, you are going to find yourself in a position that's closer to the number of peers. So the closer to 1 is obviously you are leading the market. And you're going to see different numbers here. So for the firefighter, we had 22 responses. So you fit at the entry step 16th out of 22. Mid step is 10 out of 22. So again, you got that kind of right in the middle of the pack. And then at top step, you're also at 10 out of 22. And then as you see, again, with these increases that we saw in market position, what you're going to see is that your rank gets better within this peer group. So if we implemented option A, that would put you a lot closer to the middle of the group, still a little behind. At mid-step, you're going to find a better position kind of right on market at 9 out of 12. And then top step, you're really starting to get into the groups that are leading the market. And then with option B, 13th out of 22, 8th out of 22, and then 5th out of 22. So again, you're seeing that you're getting closer to that market position or leading the market position. So we wanted to look at just where the firefighter fits within that Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota group. So kind of excluding anything outside of this very kind of local regional area. So you'll see at entry step, you are, because you're looking at your lagging market slightly, you are going to find that you are a little further behind your peer employers.
Okay.
However, what this indicates to me, because it is only 92% of market and you're at 9 out of 11, what that's indicating to me is that there's a lot of numbers that are very, very close together around your position within the market. But again, sorry, did someone have a
Yep,
question?
I'm sorry. This is Denise Kolpak. I have a question, a couple questions actually. The first is, can you share how we're incorporating the chief's data, his salary data that he put together, which was very comprehensive, as part of this work, or what next steps will be to take a look at that? My second question is, how do we consider all the other benefits that, especially it's complex in the firefighter, and I'm speaking strictly to firefighter benefits here. It's a different structure in many ways, and so full compensation includes a lot of other benefits that are unique. So how are we looking at the additional benefits as part of compensation?
Christy, do you want
Jill,
to go
did you want
ahead?
to take that?
Sure.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, then please add to it. So this is really, today's presentation is the work that MRA completed.
Okay.
And before the chief completed his gathering of data, we compared the cities. So I think they are very comparable. We did a high-level look. Camilla did a brief review, and I think Beth as well. And I think we look really pretty comparable on the base pay. So what you said is true really of all of our positions, right? We first look at base pay because that is kind of the most peer comparison that we can make. What are they paid for the 2,080 hours that they work? But from there, any additional pay or additional benefits really can differ greatly by position. So this survey did collect some of that benefit, premium pays, some of that other information as well. Today we're focused on the base pay comparison, and then we can certainly look at some additional information with the full report that we'll get back from the survey.
Jill, I'm curious, and I don't understand the detail as you drill down to know deeply. Is a fire department a fire department a fire department? For example, we're talking fire right now, and we have like the highest rating fire department in the region, I think generally. Is that apples and apples when you compare a department like ours with regional locals that don't have the same skill set and rating and training? I just don't know.
Yeah, I would tell you in the world of compensation, there is no such thing as apples to apples. There very rarely are exact comparable positions. For example, if you look at our public health department, they may have a higher number of clients that they serve in the community than some of these other cities where maybe it's more of a county function. With fire, there may be more calls for service or higher population. Virtually any position that you look at, there are going to be those nuances, both in terms of the size and scope, as well as any premium pays or, shift differentials, any of those other pay policies, and even benefit structures. So the idea of apples to apples is so complicated, but we look for the best match that we possibly can. And just as an example, as we look at fire, we have a firefighter and a fire driver level, where some other cities do not have 2 levels, and other cities may have different ranks, for example, within their police department than what we have. So we ask our participants in the surveys to respond with the best match possible. But it would be really rare that it's an absolute 100%. And again, that is why looking at base rate is kind of that most pure match in terms of pay, but absolutely those other comp policies and benefit structures are a piece of that picture too. Christy, anything to add to that?
I think you summed it up really well, Jill. I would also say, if you are taking into consideration, state ratings, federal ratings, one thing you could do is away from base pay, but also potentially providing some sort of, bonus or something that's more incentive based, because that's more around performance than it is around what are people being paid for the job duties and responsibilities in this rank. And that's really what this data that I'm showing you is telling us. When we're, I don't want to get too deep into, pay supplements, how to do a total cash analysis, but those things or total cash analysis is out of scope. However, there are other ways to incentivize or to reward for that performance outside of base pay. So base pay is really your level set, right? This is the data. This is what we need to bring somebody into the organization for this role. All right. So this is the firefighter. So as you can see, any implementation, option A or option B, is going to get you very, very in line with market, if not potentially also leading it within your smaller, more localized group. And then we have one on police officer as well. So same tables, but your police officer rates of pay are doing a slightly better in the market than the firefighter. However, it's around, it's very small percentage differences. But as you can see, currently your entry into a police officer is lagging market slightly. As you get into that mid step, you get kind of right on market. And then at your top step, you do decrease slightly. So the reason why that decrease happens is because of the differences in how many steps each organization has if they identified having a step structure. So some might have 7 steps, some might have 12 steps. So when we're looking at top step, we're looking at what is the highest amount that you pay for this rate. So that's why you're going to see a variance between mid step and top step. And then as you get into option A at the entry step, we get closer to the other entry steps within the group. And then again, with option B, you're just getting closer to market. So for the police officer, kind of ranking them within the group, we're seeing that out of 22, that you're 18th. So again, that kind of lines up with what we're seeing at that 92%. And then at the mid-step, we're also seeing you get a lot better. So you're kind of right in the middle of the pack. And then at top step, you do fall off a little bit more. But I think that's because of those larger numbers and additional steps that other organizations have for this rank. But either of the options, again, is going to put you closer to market. And then out of your specific localized group, you do see this this entry step kind of behind, you're kind of in the close to the last spot. But as you see the options A and B, you get closer to market with you really ending up in the middle of the pack at mid step and top step, which is a good position to have. And those were all of my slides. So I'm not sure if you want to continue looking at this or what you would like to do, Jill.
Are there any questions before we move away from this slide?
I just, drilling down further, last year when it came to our attention, for example, that our firefighters' starting wage was 18-something an hour. How can we see that in here, how that's going to change or be impacted or affected? Because that's what the public saw.
Yes. So we are going to look at that in just a minute here. We're going to move to that. Any other questions for Christy on this data? Okay. So then, Christy, if you can stop sharing, we'll move back to the main PowerPoint here. And, okay. So this is a glance at what option B would look like. And so for PowerPoint purposes, we only have option B. In your handouts, you do have an option A and B packet in front of you. So if you recall, our current structure only has 11 steps and just a 30% spread. So the proposed option B, grade 12, would look like this, and really all of the grades in our general pay structure would have 17 steps. In our current, our grade 12, step 3 is at 3087. The proposed step 3 would be 3226. You can see that amount above. And just looking at the maxes and how they compare, so current is 3789. The proposed max, as you can see, allows much more room for growth. Currently at any given time, we have about 30% of our employees who are at max and are only receiving the COLA one time a year without any progression because they're at the maximum of their current grade at step 11. So by expanding the range spread, expanding the grades, we now have more opportunity at those top steps as well, which helps support our place in the market as well. And then just to take a look at public safety, again, we're looking at option B, so that higher option. If you look, the entire salary structure would be adjusted, but with the accelerated growth through the range, again, if we continue that approach, you would see how this position would jump. And this is a 12, so this would be our police officer position, would jump from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7, and so on. And there would be a step, essentially 18, or that newly proposed step as well. You can see the 1 through 17, Step 1 still aligns with our regular grade 12, but there is accelerated growth through the structure for our public safety positions. And so this gives you an idea of the estimated cost of implementing the proposed plans. So, you know, if we were to implement the plan on January 1st of 25, if the plan was implemented for everyone January 1st and there was no step increase assigned at that time, that first column that says annual cost without a step shows for police and fire only the cost of A and B. All other employees you see going down, again, the cost of A and B, and then our total of all employees combined. You see the cost of the implementing A and B. And then in the percent column, that's the percent of overall payroll increase based on just that implementing and moving people from the current structure to the new option B as of January 1. The annual cost without a step, or I'm sorry, with a step is in that next column. So again, if you were to take everyone and apply the step at the time of their step increase, this shows that annualized cost. First, police and fire only, then all employees, and then the total combined. We also wanted to look at some potential offsets. Commissioner, did you have a question?
Excuse me, Joe, when you say an annualized cost, you're talking the first year,
First year,
not the second and consequent years or subsequent years. It's
correct.
first year. Okay,
First
thank you.
year in 2025, that's right. And so the offsets in red, again, trying to estimate the cost of steps for 2024 that are already budgeted. So essentially, if we did nothing, the step increases are already $816,000. The annual cost with a step incorporates that $816,000. So we tried to also then calculate or include here in the calculation the cost of just a 1% COLA for point of reference. So that 879,395, that's approximately what a 1% COLA costs, salary only. That does not include the cost of benefits. So again, you can see the offset there of the 1.696 million if we factor in the steps as well. So at the bottom, those are the totals of implementing either plan by subtracting out the costs that are already committed through step increases or through a 1% COLA. Of course, that number changes if it was a 2%, 3%, 4%, but we just wanted to demonstrate at least what a 1% COLA would look like. So as we talked about earlier, you can see the cost of implementing either option A or B with 75% of our general fund being salary and benefits. These are larger dollar amounts that we are discussing. Any questions before we move ahead to another factor to consider?
So just clarify one more time. So the bottom two numbers there, the 1.9 and the 3.9 is, how do I ask this? It would not include a separate COLA, or would it?
That would be a decision through the budget process.
I guess my question is more, would this get us to the current market without a COLA?
This salary structure would, yes, help get us to the current market, January of 25. But what it doesn't factor, because it's unknown what other cities in our region will do for COLAs for 2025.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we would have to, consider that through the budget process as well. If we don't, we would potentially fall behind in market. Any other questions? Okay. Commissioner Strand raised this question a little bit earlier about the Grand Forks pay structure. I believe it was Commissioner Strand. So I want to just jump ahead to that discussion point as well. And Beth is handing around a document that shows comparisons with Grand Forks for police, fire, engineer, and public health nurse, so that you have just those 4 positions. We've done more comparisons, but this gives you a snapshot. So as we think about our comp philosophy, the work that's been done, and you just saw those total dollar amounts, that really was to maintain competitiveness with our regional market. We all know that our neighbors in Grand Forks implemented a pay structure this year that appears to really be leading the regional market. And so we want to take a look at, if we,
Just a question, Joel. Are we running till 12:30 now?
the
Because
meeting.
I know
believe
that
is
Susan
scheduled.
had it, we're not in competition with Grand Forks. All these are negative. I mean, there's a lot of data for everybody to take in today. I'm just curious how far we want to go into this.
I think this is an
I
important
see negatives,
component.
negatives, so we're not comparison to Grand Forks.
Right, I think
We are
we-
comparison with the region, your data study and all that showed that, but it's up to the commissioners. But I think they can read this, Joel, if we want to get back on track.
Sure. Yes, so I just, brief explanation, we isolated Grand Forks with our options A and B. I think it's important to be transparent about, and to have guidance from you all. Are we comparing with that regional market? Or are we trying to catch the pay rates, the pay structure that Grand Forks has implemented? So as the mayor said, you have that data in the spreadsheets in front of you. You can see how we are comparing. So those are items that we would want you to also consider in your guidance on how we should move forward with our pay structure.
It's up to the team, but I think there's a lot of data here that you have to absorb today. And yes, okay, Grand Forks in a lot of areas other than firefighters, civil service, and public health nurse and other areas is in a different waveform. And I think they can look at that and review it to see where we're at, our comparison and what was marketed in the region. And that's kind of where your structure is coming in. I don't know if the city could afford to go to the Grand Forks levels. They were 20 to 30% lower. That would be a huge cost.
Okay. Are there any questions before Christy and Pat leave us for the rest of the meeting?
What I'd like to have a better understanding is the philosophies. On one end, you're really trying to retain your career seasoned, experienced workers, and that's a philosophy. On another end, you want to fill your workforce with brand-new people and have people, I mean, I've seen this in schools where some people really want teachers to stay forever, and another district might not necessarily have the same philosophy to encourage them to, in reality, stay there longer. How do we weigh these comparisons of a philosophy to retain and invest and keep your tenured employees, that's maybe not the right word, versus losing them?
So I think, when we look at the minimum of our ranges, that typically that 1 to 3, although we've been bringing people in a bit higher in the last year or two. So let's just say steps 1 to 5 are really important in terms of recruiting. What we've tried to accomplish with expanding the range spread and allowing for more growth within the range is to support that retention piece. We talked earlier both in public safety, but we're seeing it with other positions too, where we begin to lag the market when you start to get in that 2, 3, 4, in that area of the range. And then once someone hits 11, step 11 in our current structure, there's nowhere for them to go without a COLA. And so when we have cities that we're comparing with for market purposes at much wider range spreads and higher maximums, then we do potentially risk losing people to employers that are paying higher when they've hit that level in their career where they're really experienced at, especially by year 10. So I think that this structure assists us in both areas, both in recruiting as well as retention. And again, when we compare to the regional market, which is a composition of smaller cities to much larger cities, that philosophy is about where do we want to be within market.
I think what you get is more predictability, because one of the things they changed is all the steps are 2.5% rather than cents. So everybody gets an equal break on that particular issue. Last year, we had 30% of our employees were dependent only on the COLA to go in their wage. If we have the more steps, then the ability is for people to continue to go up in steps through their career. So part of this is a big correction for the 30% of the people who do not go up. So that's what this is changing if we do that 75%. So to your question, Commissioner, it would work on retention, because the people that work for us and stay with us would be, oh, okay, I have that. And then they wouldn't be as dependent on a COLA, because if our COLA is up and down, then that somebody expects, at least 2%. Well, last year we were low on our COLA. I got a lot of complaints from seasoned employees just that said, well, I didn't get a raise or didn't get anything, was paid the same pay. So I think what we're trying to do is, quote, meet the market, because the market is broader and we're trying to get that corrected. 2 is predictable steps, 2.5%, which it wasn't before. And then 3 is to bring the lower market up as well, because we are bringing, if you saw the firefighters, we're bringing their pay up when they start.
Can I ask one more question? And this is, again, more of a philosophical question, but we know and understand that the gender gap is the worst in North Dakota. I believe we're number 49 out of 50. In all of this, in the systems, are there some protective mechanisms for female-dominated roles versus male?
That's a great question, and I think there's more we probably could do to study that very question. I will say, though, in determining starting rates of pay and then the movement through the ranges, a step and grade system, I think, is one of the safest systems to ensure equity in how you are moving through the structure. So versus a range system where, starting rates of pay can vary and then certainly percent of increases with pay for performance can differ as well more greatly. So, it is something that we certainly could study more to have a more concrete answer for you. But I think there are safeguards just that are inherent in a step and grade system that help us with that potential issue. Okay, thank you, Christy and Pat. We appreciate your time, and thank you, Commission, for listening to all of the information. Commissioner Kolpak?
Yes, can we get the slides that have been shared today, please?
Yes.
Jill,
Thank you all.
I would recommend maybe some of us, me, that's a little slower on the uptake, that we can have a sit down and talk through some of this in more detail as well. I would benefit from that if we can find a time.
Yeah, I think any commissioner can do that. John will be happy to set that up, and we're going to have Susan in the room as well, Michael as well. Sit that out with the team and go through it. It's a lot. That's why I'm just saying we got a lot of paper in front of us today, and I don't want to get down on that, but we're still trying to get through the finance committee and get through the stuff. So
Yes, thank you.
We just wanted to say thank you, Jill. Thank you, Commission.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate the explanation.
Thank you, and I just want to
Thank you.
mention to Camilla and Beth and the work that they've done on this project too.
Yes.
So thank you for all the efforts.
All right, so we can go back to the original agenda that was dispersed on Friday, and we all have copies now. So as I was mentioning to start with, so I have the first quarter, that's page number 2. We've talked about that at a previous city commission meeting, but I just put that in as a reference. Both items are, both revenues and expenses are running a little higher, but at this point, I'm still projecting a net balanced budget. First quarter, there's just so many unknowns, particularly with seasonality of construction and the weather and timing of different tax revenues and that sort of thing. So on page 1, that is the general fund budget to actual through April. That's in the packet for this evening as well, so you wouldn't have seen this yet. So as I mentioned, revenues and expenses are both running a little below budget. The net is revenues over expenditures. I started to write a few little comments down at the bottom for things that I thought might be helpful. At this point, it's a lot of timing issues. There's tax remittance timing issues. I'm trying to figure out if there's any sort of flow that I can start estimating when we put the budget in by month, and really it doesn't seem like that. So I'll be kind of watching that. Both the licenses and the fees are construction related, so since we're pretty early in that, it's hard to estimate. We do a lot of those on divided by 12 months, but that's not really how the money comes in. Obviously higher interest rates, some timing with the Station 8 personnel. I made Chief Dirksen very aware of that. He's not under budget. The budget's going to catch up when he brings on his full Station 8 personnel later this year. Obviously, we had a mild winter, so that helps. And then we estimate salary savings, so that shows in number 18, but when we actually have salary savings, that's reflected up within the different departments. So that is the general fund. Anyone have questions on that? Page 4, then, I believe, is the sales tax. This is, we talked about this at the city commission meeting a couple weeks ago, so this is proving us out. There was a big decrease in February. The message that I got from the tax department was it was just a timing issue, and they've proved that. I think they called it a flop, as I recall. A lot of the revenues from February were reflected or paid on April 1st, so they went in the next months. So that's a big correction. So I think we went from a -3 to a positive 14% growth. So it's just like the stock market. You can't really look at it every month. You kind of got to just look at it over time. And then just a couple verbal updates. So we are in the middle of, well, not in the middle, we're in the very end of our audit. We should have that completed early June, so have those reports ready for you by July. It's gone very well. Our team's done a fantastic job. I Bailey pushed up a lot of the deadlines, and we met them all, so I'm super proud of that team. Budget, as you know, we're undergoing that. We're in the middle of that. We've met with all the departments, and so now it's time for the budget team to sit through and kind of sift through all the requests. Compensation is going to be a big part of that, which is why we wanted to spend a lot of time on that with you today. We kind of have an idea. Our plan is, we'll be presenting some a la carte options. Do this, but here's the cost, and there's what other options are as far as revenue enhancements or expense decreases. There's just not a lot of that when our pie grid is 75% is salary. The other quarter is things that are inflation driven, utilities, maintenance agreements, supplies. So, that's going to be a challenge for all of us. And then the ERP implementation, that is our new software system. That team is working like mad. I'm very proud of them as well. We are going to be the beta test for Tyler's brand new software. So we're getting a lot of attention. Their implementation manager was on site on Thursday and met with the team. We have people from their implementation team sitting in on our demos. So when things aren't going right, they're jumping right in on that. So I think that's very exciting, and I think it's a great opportunity for Fargo, getting a lot of attention. And, the option was to go with their current version and then make some changes again in 4 years. So we decided we wanted to right the first time. Jamie's doing a fantastic job leading all that. I mean, it is literally, she's created 7,000 new chart of accounts because everything's going to change, but it'll be a change for the better, I assure you. So that's what I have as far as the standing items. Any questions?
Maybe it's not fitting here or even today, but around the corner, we have some votes coming on sales taxes. And I'm curious, at what point do we anticipate and look at them? Is it 2028 that the first vote is? And just so that really, get that on all of our radar, because that could really have will have a huge impact on our whole future budgeting.
Utility tax goes out in 2028. The intended purpose or discussion is to have a vote in 2026.
26,
To
that's,
vote to renew it. We could have done it this election cycle. Seems a little bit, after the Fargo Dome vote, people are a little down on taxes right now, so it's felt maybe a little bit. But we would need to educate the public and tell them how important it is, John. It's a good point you brought up. But the intent is in 2026 to have the vote, unless you want to advance it for the November vote of this year. So that would be up to the commissioners if you want to do a different time. Commissioner Kolpak on utilities, is there a time frame they wanted it sooner than 26?
No, 26, and then they can come back in 28, depending on the vote, yeah.
And typically it takes 2 years to implement it, so it goes into implementation in 28.
and bear with me, but it's a moot point to think about discussing, because we can't, with these different tax levies, eliminate the cap on sales taxes. There's a cap on some of them.
Yeah, that's right, because it's what it was.
Unless we did it all of them, we can't. So that we're with that system. The more we anticipate and educate the public and let them know this is coming proactively.
I have a question, Susan. I almost hate to ask this question with everything on your plate, but we did talk earlier about coming up with a reserves policy. Yeah, so is that going to be part of the recommendation in the budgeting process?
It's on my list.
Okay, thank you.
I want to see how the end of 2023 comes out after we do all the year-end adjustments, and then trying to do a little research on what other cities have. It's very dependent on other factors. Each city is unique, so I want to make sure we're not pigeonholing us into something that doesn't really match. So, but yes, I have that as something to work on. Thank you.
Michael, anything else we need to accomplish today?
We have just a couple of last agenda items here, Mayor, and so I just defer to Susan if there's anything else here.
If I can just interrupt here just a bit. In relationship to the sales tax discussion that was happening here, the thing I think that brought us to long-term financial planning is truly the infrastructure funding. And where are we in regards to, I know you're collecting some information about operational long-range planning. Where are we in that regard? And then how do we start plugging in a longer-term kind of thinking and planning in regards to sales tax and the general fund?
We have been working with engineering. That's such a broad concept. We're trying to figure out how to roll that in with the budget, but it's like almost too much at one time, at least to start with. But yes, we're always looking at those two together because, we sometimes look at it in a silo, but really all of those affect other, so for example, CIP, it seems like it's kind of its own thing, but there's fees that come from that run to the general fund, that also affects our water sales tax because some of the water rack project money goes to that. It affects that sales tax, that rate fees. It's just it's a very big it's a mix that ties with all of the different, I don't know how to say it, but all of the different funds. And so as part of our budget, we're going to be meeting with Tom and working through how we can sort of demonstrate how those different things affect each other.
So one of the things we're working on, I don't know if this helps clarify, on the infrastructure side, is we're modeling different things right now. So we're looking at the water, the wastewater, the stormwater, the engineering. So the engineering has a sales tax and rates and how they work collaboratively and how that can look if the sales tax gets extended. So we do have some work we're doing right now and modeling different options. And then the thought was we would come back to the group, and you'll probably see next some presentations between the different utilities on different options of what we could look at.
Okay.
So
Mike,
Sorry, microphone's not on.
So
So,
the,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, the last item, there's a cover letter from the mayor in your packet, commissioners, that would just formalize the establishment of the city commission as the finance committee. So I won't read that cover letter for you, but that resolution, if acceptable to the commission, could be agendized at a future city commission meeting. And this is what would implement formally the Finance Committee as City Commission and formally disband the October 1997 Finance Committee that then Mayor Furness initiated by letter and brought to the commission at that time. So this resolution, Nancy assisted us with drafting, and this would be on a future agenda. We would certainly want to answer any questions you would have, but this would be at your next commission agenda if acceptable to the commission.
if there's any corrections or additions to it, please let Michael know if there's something you see in there that you don't think should be there, so we would know before we go to the commission meeting. And my presumption is we don't vote at this meeting to do that, Mike, we just bring it forward.
Correct. This was brought to you as a preview, just for any discussion purposes. The suggested motion that would appear on the future June 10 City Commission agenda is that suggested motion.
The only thing I would suggest here is that there's a purpose statement, and maybe it is within the whereases, but, yeah. Okay, so we can send some suggestions if.
Yes, if you have any suggestions. I think the purpose statement really, if I had to look for it, it really is in the second whereas. That's talking about the financial health, well-being of the city. It's critical, and that the commission has a duty and responsibility. But if you would want to add to that whereas, I think it could be there or right below it as well. So.
Help me understand also, is there a position evaluation committee process anymore, or has that been transitioned or redefined, just for my sake?
So what we have been doing is we've transitioned to the staff meeting, finance, admin, and HR. And so far, there have not been a whole lot of HR items, but those are being brought forward along with any finance items from the staff meeting onto the commission agenda for approval.
Any other business of this meeting? Susan, we're okay? Thank you for the information. I'm glad sales tax gone up. Thank you. It's nice to see that go up. I think, John, when we talked about the diversion, they thought they had to get 1.5%, so we're well above that. That's pretty good. So I will say that we are adjourned. Thank you.